Good morning, St. John's. Welcome to a really special forum today. I'm delighted to introduce a person who really doesn't need much introduction, but a great friend of St. John's, Ray Suarez. He has been here before. You may have seen him doing the very same Advent delivery. It's a real treat to have him. He was also a speaker at one of our men's retreats, and that was a real treat, as some of you remember. Ray is the host of a public radio program and podcast called On Shifting Ground, produced by the World Affairs Council and KQED FM. His next book, can't wait to hear, we've been hearing about this, it's coming out by Little Brown in April. We Are Home, Becoming American in the 21st Century. Great stuff. It's on the modern era of American immigration. It's has some really good material in it. In recent years, he's been a visiting professor of political science at NYU, Shanghai, and the John McCloy Visiting Professor of American Studies at Amherst College. Earlier in his career, Ray was the host of the daily news program Inside Story from Al Jazeera America. He was, as many of you remember, the chief national correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, and I remember so fondly his voice, hearing it so often as the host of Talk of the Nation on NPR. He's a longtime member of St. Columba's. We can't pull him over here because he's very engaged with them. He is also currently serves on the chapter of the Washington National Cathedral. So can you give a warm St. John's welcome to Ray?
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be back. And when Ann Durst got in touch a few months ago to see if I was interested in coming back for this forum this year, as always, I had to think about the what, as in what to talk about. Back in the mid-90s, when St. Columba's rector Jim Donald first asked me to give an Advent talk, the cultural scene was very different. The American economy was rocking and rolling, the tech revolution was creating new fortunes, and a rocket-fueled stock market was making people feel rich, or at least richer, leading to Christmas seasons of excess. Like this Neiman Marcus nativity scene that costs a mere $5,000. Maybe another rant on another day would be to unpack the theology behind a $5,000 nativity scene, but it's a perfect symbol for holiday time rituals that left a lot of people feeling burdened by the expectations, running to keep up, so wrung out by the time the 25th of December finally arrived that it wasn't even that joyful anymore. So the talks I gave during those years were complete with Martha Stewart jokes and holiday party jokes built around overconsumption and really the sin of pride. And those talks landed and would kind of fall flat today. They would seem really entirely out of place right now. That was before 9/11, before a deep recession, before the pandemic, before serial crises that made some of the burning questions of the 1990s, like a reporter asking Bill Clinton, boxers or briefs, seem silly, quaint, and yes, that really happened. And yes, he really answered, and no, it wasn't me who asked him. I'm in the same place every Sunday, just a short drive up Wisconsin Avenue, and I look around the nave every Sunday. And by the way, yay us up there in Tenleytown, the week before last, 5 baptisms and a dozen confirmations. And I look at the line for coffee hour, and I look around the church, and I see some of the same faces that I've seen since I got to Washington in the early 1990s. And that's warming, and it's comforting, and it's reinforcing, and as encouraging in its way as all the faces I see of people I don't really know yet. That's the terrific part about the church as a living organism. Then 2 members of St. Columba's staff showed me this, something they came across by accident. This is the annual stewardship brochure for St. Columba's from 1996. And after I get over the distraction of all that dark hair and no wrinkles and little kids, 7 and 5, we're being greeted by the oldest member of the congregation at the time, George Fletcher, born with the 20th century, a member of one of the founding families of the congregation, who used to tell me stories of when all the roads in that part of town were still unpaved, when the chapel that was St. Albans Mission for white worshipers in that part of Washington was still made of wood, when Albemarle Street was still Murdoch Mill Road, and the water that fed Mr. Murdoch's mill had to be channeled, buried, and covered over. It's still down there somewhere underneath Albemarle Street. And I knew what the rector was going for by enlisting my family to illustrate continuity, a young family coming through the front door to be greeted by a pillar of the congregation. And those little kids, I mean, you can see my son there, but that's the back of my daughter's head there. Those little kids, well, one turns 35 next month and lives on the other side of the planet in Shanghai, and the other is a priest, likely giving communion on the Upper West Side of Manhattan right now as I'm talking. So much time has passed, real calendar time and emotional time and life milestone time. And we got old. And many of the people watching those Advent talks are no longer with us. In the meantime, in this season of preparation, I'm happily preparing to spend Christmas with all 3 of my children, because the third one wasn't even contemplated when that fundraising picture was taken, and she's already an adult. So a lot of time has passed. In this season of preparation, in this compact cluster of weeks, a lot has to get done. But really, what are we preparing for? Those of us who are on this side of 60, what are we preparing for in the wider sense? I had to think about it, and I came up with the term, the last laps, the final chapters. Not that I'm planning on checking out momentarily, but at least I can sort of see the finish line. A different time of life with different realities and rhythms. In a sense, I'm preparing to become George Fletcher. God willing, if I ever see 95, as George was at that point. And here's the thing, you all are immersed in your life up to here and watching from a distance at the same time, contemplating who you are and how you live. You're preparing both voluntarily, consciously, and involuntarily in ways that you can't yet fully assess and can't yet fully understand. These changes involve a core paradox of twin opposed tasks. For me, as I try to describe it, I call it becoming softer and harder at the same time. And I'll try to explain. And maybe those of you who are around my age may have felt similar things. No, maybe not. We can talk about it. For one thing, I'm becoming impossibly, what should I call it? Maybe sentimental, but that familiar word sentimental doesn't even really get you all the way there. When George Bailey's neighbors rally to his side and fill a basket with money while fake snow tumbles from their hats and they sing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," I can hardly keep my composure. I was never like that before. When young Mary Bailey walks into Gower's drugstore and purposely whispers into young George's deaf ear, "George Bailey, I love you till the day I die," I have to look away from the TV screen. What a goofball. How did that happen? When I'm in Midtown Manhattan, I often stop and stare at the bas-relief in front of the Daily News building on 42nd Street. It is a beautiful 30s machined Art Deco style sculpture based on an apocryphal quote from Abraham Lincoln. God must have loved common people. He made so many of them. And I get ridiculously emotional. And I almost to the point where I want to stop people who are walking by and tell them to look at it. When every All Saints Sunday, we belt out, I sing a song of the saints of God, I get so choked up by the third verse that I can hardly croak out the words. The world is bright with the joyous saints who love to do Jesus' will. You can meet them in school or in lanes or at sea, in church or in trains or in shops or at tea. For the saints of God are just folk like me, and I mean to be one too. When I was 26, it was charming, Sunday schoolish, and maybe a little bit of what the British call twee, as Webster defines it, affectedly cute or quaint. When I was 46, I wanted my children to love it as much as I do, and to recognize in those charming old lyrics from Lesbia Scott that song is part of what makes us who we are in this place. But now that I'm 66, it's the whole game, right there in words of 1 and 2 syllables. A world of people you can run into anywhere, lit up by simple holiness. It's not deep theology. It's not trying to plow through Augustine's City of God. It's not, exegetical. It's just these beautiful, simple, also in the British sense, homely, meaning the way that we use homey words, of running into people in just the normal places you go who are saints. And you want to be one too. How did I get in these final laps to the point where this song means something to me that I never could have imagined at 26 or 46? How did I get to be such a squish and totally unembarrassed about it? Well, I spent decades keeping the world at arm's length for a living, and I had to. As a reporter, you need to keep a critical distance from what you're covering, or else you can't see it very clearly. All you can see is how you feel about it. Now, not entirely, but you can't do the job well and be made of stone. The reporting suffers. You could be interviewing all 3 little girls who've lost both their parents to HIV and are shell-shocked. And one of the ways you recognize that they're shell-shocked is because you know from the way your own children act when they're just overwhelmed what kids are like. The oldest sister, over on the right, is 16, and she's running the household with for her two younger siblings. You could be in a village where almost all the adults have died and meet a 19-year-old girl who now cares for 6 cousins and walk away knowing this is not going to be okay, and there's not really anything you personally can do about it except tell people that it's happening. You can watch as the people of a neighborhood in Port-au-Prince desperately scramble through the ruins of a building, looking for what's left of their loved ones and all their meager worldly possessions, or get the distinct and unforgettable odor of human remains as you pass the National Nursing College, where 2 entire classes were crushed to death with no survivors. Or perhaps less jolting to the senses, walk the deserted streets of one of the largest cities on earth, Mexico City, in the middle of a pandemic where people are so afraid. Normally crammed curb to curb are suddenly empty. The job makes you a proxy for the people who read, listen, and watch, so you have to convey some of the sense of being in a place of spending enough time with people so that you understand the terrible things that they're going through. But at the same time, you can't be a blubbering, emoting bag of sentiments. The job requires a dispassionate view. And what is dispassion but a willful separation from the sufferings of others? And they were suffering, all right, but I needed to stand apart at least so I could see them clearly and tell others what I was seeing. Today, I'm still in the game, or I'm trying to be. You're welcome to listen to my weekly radio show and podcast. And as was mentioned, read my next book, which comes out in April, but with an important difference. I finally got old enough to grant myself permission to use the word I. In my business, that's showing a little more leg. I'm letting the veil slip a little more for two reasons. One, that I figured out after more than 40 years of playing it straight that I had earned the right to an opinion. And the second, I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel the sufferings of others. I can't strike that pose as successfully that holds me apart from the things, the ideas, the events, the people I cover, in part because I'm not the same person anymore either. I don't know about you, for those of us with gray hair in this room. I just haven't got time anymore, or I feel more keenly that I don't have the time for harsh judgment of others, for making conclusions about the motives and the impulses and the desires of others. I haven't got time for doing the compulsory figure eights of disinterestedness, going through the motions of an austere separation from the muck and mire. Now, I can't stand today's politics. Covered it for a long time. I did my time. I can't stand the suggestion that some people are vermin, that some people are polluting the nation's blood, that the best thing you can do for someone in trouble is shame them and deride them and harangue them and hold them up to scorn for their own good. Just no time for that anymore. Last laps for me, maybe for you, has meant letting go. Not letting go of everything all the time. It's meant trying to quickly run through what's left of life, frantically sorting between what matters and what doesn't, and more just doesn't. Choosing between what I can spare the psychic energy to care about and what I just can't. Choosing between essentials and non-essentials. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I was an altar assistant, washing hands, clearing elements, serving the chalice, in white gloves, no less. The Episcopal Church had standards in those days. It's a much more chill age we're living in now. I grew up in the low church. We had communion once a month, morning prayer the other Sundays. You didn't take communion until you were confirmed. And of course, you were not welcome to the bread and wine if you were not baptized. I was taught the rules. I understood the rules. And since I was actively on the inside, I followed the rules. And then I lived another half century. And I sat in Catholic churches around the world where priests very specifically told people not to come to communion. And I thought about that as I was sitting in the pews. I talked to people new to the church who didn't know whether they were baptized or not, which seemed to me to be rather novel. But then I remembered over time and learned that not everybody had my kind of resume. And there were people who just didn't know, and why would you know? But they still wanted to be part of the central drama of our sacramental life together and I thought, well, maybe if someone finds their way to us, come in on a normal Sunday morning, what do you do? What do you do before we get to this point in the drama? You listen to scripture, you listen to some teaching from the pulpit, you confess your sins, you receive absolution, then join in prayer around the memorial of Christ's dedication of his life and his body to his friends, and to the human race. And maybe that's good enough. Once you've done all that, that's probably good enough. Now, a quietly rule-following guy, which is definitely what I am, who used to kill time during boring sermons reading the articles of religion at the back of the Book of Common Prayer, now says a rule that excludes rather than invites in a sacrament built around invitation maybe isn't such a great rule. I'm a rebel now. And besides, the only way I ever knew for sure that I was baptized was because I had seen pictures of it. There's no tattoo. It left no mark. My mother told me about it. My father couldn't tell me about it because he was on active duty in the Pacific Fleet, so he wasn't even there. I know what the canons say. I know the quickly sketched out standards in tiny type in prayer book rubrics. And now I'm team open table and look forward to the day when our cousins in the Catholic Church stop telling people not to come to communion. Recently in conversation, someone reminded me that would be a violation of canon law, like I didn't know, of centuries of church teaching. And I realized I don't care. It turns out I've been worn smooth by wind and water. I want to move through the world with a minimum of resistance. I want to be free, like river stones, of excess material. I want to be less encumbered by the need to be right. I can't run through life subjecting people to emotional biopsies. I just can't. Wondering about the sincerity or validity of their choices in life. I have no basis, no standing, no possible way of living the life of someone who's suffering as they try to work out who to be and how to be that person. If they're convinced they were meant to live as a man instead of a woman or vice versa, well, like Pope Francis said, and I rarely quote popes for the record, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? If we get tattoos, we should all get that one on our left arms. I'm not a physician. I'm not an endocrinologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a legislator. I just want a world that works with a minimum of cruelty and a maximum of decency, all that we can muster for each other. And as I watch my country descend into meanness and triviality over gender and sexuality and appearance, grab judgment and hostility and mockery with muscular gusto, pass laws that seem to have no other purpose than to make the lives of people who already have plenty on their plates more unhappy and more dangerous. That's not political. Really, it's not political. It's a recognition that my life is too short to burn up the requisite psychic energy, expend the emotional energy, taking the judgment seat to inform others that I don't approve of them. Much less, as too many Americans are clamoring to do, tell them they're repulsive, dangerous, worthy not of embrace, but only worthy of shunning. It doesn't make you Gandhi to just be nice to people that you run into. It just makes you decent. And decency, being some sort of exalted place, shouldn't be very exalted. It should be right down here at ground level where everyone can step onto that step. Many people sitting as we are in churches all over the country would find what I've just said to be unchristian, perverse, and weak-kneed. Last laps are like realizing toward the end of a journey that your boat is sitting too low in the water. And every time a choppy wave comes along, you might take on a little bit more water. You know you've got to throw stuff overboard to stay upright, to not have those waves cause your little canoe, your whole world, to founder. Age should bring a kind of confidence, sure. Hopefully you have a better idea of who you are and who you aren't by this stage of the game. But it should also bring a kind of modesty instead of pride. Not pride in what you became, but a modesty in being comfortable with the fact that life still remains mysterious. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and maybe even can't know. A binary yes, no, black and white world becomes less possible as I get older. And instead of this being a problem, because there's got to be one answer, well, why does there have to be just one answer? I asked AI to create an image of a man unburdened and rising. Those were some of the key words I put in the description. It didn't come up with me. This is what artificial intelligence came up with. My version doesn't look exactly like this, but that increased permeability, that willingness to let stuff get to me, along with the unburdening of judgment, of conclusion, of other people's rules, makes you lighter. So maybe this isn't a bad illustration. On your last laps, you can, once liberated, now finally fully be yourself, just more yourself, because you're not performing the role of being yourself for everyone else. A life refined, reduced like a sauce to something more like essentials. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm aiming for. Able to listen better, able to understand better, able to be both unburdened and less willing to be bogged down by trivia. Able to look at life like a popover, where you can choose to just eat the bread and spit out the hot air. In this season of preparation, what's making your canoe sit too low in the water? I mean, besides core, essential, required, rock bottom you, is there stuff accumulated, swollen, heavy, that you're reaching an age when you can decide you just don't have to hold on with that white-knuckled grip any longer? Well, one thing that potentially fatal illness does, it tends to concentrate the mind. And maybe I got to these thoughts a little sooner because of that. The very real possibility of decline ending in death forces you into a season of preparation, whether you want to be there or not. Even if it's only preparation to be okay about being unsure of everything that comes next, because you just don't know how much coming next there is. Illusions, expectations of others, disappointments, setbacks, that at this stage of the game are just doing you absolutely no good at all. Stuff you can't even remember why you're entangled with in the first place. Maybe it's a good time to empty the closet. This is AI too, by the way. I told the generator to give me a full and messy closet. This is not my closet, for the record. The beginning of the church year is conveniently the end of the world's year. And as people who are ideally defined by being in the world but not of it, we can use these next few weeks and take an emotional inventory. Count the half pairs in the psychic sock drawer and just get rid of them instead of searching in vain for that other sock. I hope that in the midst of life's trials and challenges, you can see what is essential and see what is good, like flecks of gold in your pan. I know I'm extremely lucky. I've had the same girlfriend since I was 18. And somehow, she always manages to be on the same side when we take a picture, which makes it great for doing a montage. For 5 decades, I get to go to amazing places and see amazing things. This is an enormous Hindu temple, but you can't guess where it is. It's in Frisco, Texas, in the Dallas suburbs, rather than in India. And it is part of the new amazing country that's growing all around us, which I hope you'll read about in April when We Are Home comes out. And I get to talk to you year after year, my very distanced and very large and only slightly dysfunctional extended family, and give you some things to think about. Sending me also in search of the exotic, like a machine that makes 10,000 Madeleines an hour. So you can bite into one and think about what you're going to say on Advent 2. And it sends me also in the exotic, search of the exotic, for new themes to bring up at Christmas time, and both ones that I fully endorse and ones that I wonder about. And I think you can agree with me that this is kind of wonderfully terrible, even if you like cats. I don't know. It comes in 5 shipments, so you can stop anytime you want. I guess the bottom line is, don't feel rushed. Don't feel hustled and hassled. You get to have your Advent and your Christmas a la carte. When you get to the point where you feel like you're being pushed to things and to activities and to places that no longer are invested with the proper joy, just say, well, just say no, as Nancy Reagan, just say ho. Instead of ho, 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 which is overdoing it, just say ho. You can prepare in a way that doesn't involve a begrudging, self-sacrificial time, but is instead a time where the joy is charged by happy anticipation rather than dread. The smiling energy that's so palpable when you green the nave or do something special with somebody in these weeks leading up to Christmas. My wish for you is that you carry that spirit, especially if you're in the last laps, well beyond these coming weeks and into the new year. That idea of being unburdened, of letting go of the inessentials, of packing light for this stage of the journey. We had an associate at St. Columba's named Jay Sidebotham. His work is now nationally known. And he used to remind us every Advent, slow down, quiet, it's Advent. Thanks a lot. Good to see you all.
Thank you, Ray. That was wonderful. We have a few minutes for questions from the group, and I'll hand it.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. But at the beginning, you said that you were getting softer in some ways and harder in other ways. I don't think you got to the harder part, did you? Or is that
The
in
willingness to just say that doesn't matter is actually part of the hardening up.
It is hard,
Just
yeah.
to insist, there's just things that are whipping people up and winding them up that just don't matter, is me stamping my little foot and saying, that's enough. I'm not going to do that. I can actually choose to engage, and I'm not. And that's harder. While I'm blubbering over George Bailey, I'm also saying, not going to do that, even though that's what's expected now in 2023.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ray, I just want to thank you so much for this talk and for your wonderful outgoing feelings. I came thinking I was going to have to write what I do in my trust, what I do in my will, and I thought you were going to give us a big outline for that. And I'm really thankful.
This wasn't that talk.
That- So I just want you
You
to
want me to
know-
go back to the cat slide? Is that?
So so this is the underpinning of those details that we do have to look at, but much broader. And I just really want to thank you.
It was my joy, my joy. Thank Ann. Don't thank me. You know, she just winds me up and lets me go. It's,
Cindy.
Thanks, Ray. I'll add my thanks. I just want to make sure this has been recorded. I came in a little late because I want to share it with everybody I can think of. Folks from here and elsewhere who haven't had a chance yet to hear it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. And if you, Ray will be here for a little bit. So if you want to come up and have a chat with him, please do. Thanks again, Ray. for
my joy.
wonderful-
Thank you.